I had spent years searching for love. Every time I brought a man home, my father had a reason to say no. He is not rich enough. He is too short. He is an Isoko man. Never. He is not from a reputable family. He is just not good enough for you, my darling Judith. It became a circle. I would meet someone, fall in love, take him home and watch my father tear him apart. It didn't matter that they loved me. It didn't matter that they treated me well. It didn't matter that I was happy. My father always found something wrong. At some point, I started to believe him. Maybe none of them were good enough. Maybe I was rushing things. Maybe I needed to wait for someone truly special. Then I met Victor. It happened on an ordinary afternoon at a restaurant. I was sitting alone, sipping on a cold drink, when he walked up to me. "You're the most beautiful woman in this room," he said. I rolled my eyes, half smiling. That's a terrible pickup line. He laughed. Maybe, or it's true. We talked. One conversation turned into another and another. Days passed, then weeks, and suddenly I found myself falling for him. Victor was different. He wasn't just charming. He was attentive. He knew how to make me laugh, how to listen, how to say the right things at the right time. It was as if he had studied me, learned every little thing about me before we even met. I should have questioned that. I should have seen it. But I was too caught up in the idea of finally being in love with someone I could keep. And when I finally took him home to meet my father, something strange happened. Instead of his usual disapproving frown, my father smiled. He asked for his name and Victor responded. "Ah, Victor. See it. They laughed together, talked like old friends, as if they had known each other forever. It was the first time my father ever approved anyone I brought home. I thought I was lucky. I had no idea what I had walked into. The wedding was perfect. My father spared no expense. He insisted on covering most of the costs. He gave Victor a position in his company, made him his right-hand man. At first, I was touched. I thought it meant he was trying to be a good father, making up for all those years of rejection. They were always together, business trips, late nights at the office, important meetings. At first I was happy that my husband and my father were close. But then, little things started to bother me. Victor was never home. My father always knew where he was. And when I called, it was always the same excuse. "I'm with your dad." I let it go. I had my own life, my own business, my own little girl to take care of. But when Victor missed Valentine's Day, I felt something shift. I called him. "Where are you?" "With your dad, love. We're in a business meeting." He sent me gifts, money, made up for it with sweet words, and I believed him. Then on my birthday, he was missing again. "Another business meeting?" I asked, my voice tight. "I'm so sorry, Judith. I'll make it up to you." And he did, with a brand new car. But something didn't feel right. Something was wrong. Victor had traveled again. My father went with him. It was Victor's birthday. He called me that morning, his voice laced with fake regrets. I wish I could be there, baby, but this business deal is too important." I smiled through the phone. "It's okay, I understand," I said, but I didn't. Not really. That night, I sat alone in our bedroom, staring at my phone, staring at the last message he sent. Then an idea crept into my mind. A surprise. I had a spare key to my father's house in Abuja. I could fly down, show up at his door, and spend the night with my husband. It was romantic, right? It was supposed to be romantic, but nothing prepared me for what I saw. I packed a bag, left my daughter with my mother, and went to Abuja unannounced. My father had a house there, a luxurious Eden place he always used whenever he traveled. The house was dark when I arrived. Only a faint glow of light came from upstairs. Then I heard it. Morning. I froze at the bottom of the stairs. My heart slammed against my ribs. I took a step forward, then another. I didn't want to believe it. I could not believe it. My father had never been the cheating type. And Victor was supposed to love me. So who was cheating on who? I wondered to myself. I climbed the stairs slowly, my breath shallow, the sound getting louder. My hands trembled as I took out my phone and pressed record. I didn't know what I was about to see. I didn't know it would ruin me. But I wanted proof, so I kept recording. Step by step, I moved toward the half-open door. The sounds grew louder. Then I pushed the door wider, and my world ended. My father, on his knees, Victor's fingers tangled in his hair. I watched as my father pleased my husband like a desperate man. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Victor's eyes flew open. He pushed my father away so fast he almost fell back. Judith, my father turned, horror plastered across his face. Judith, it's not what it looks like, oh. I took a step back, then another. My vision blurred. My chest tightened. I felt like I was drowning in something too thick, too dark to escape. Not what it looks like. My voice cracked. You were... I couldn't say it. I couldn't even form the words. I looked at Victor. His face was pale, his lips moving, but no words coming out. And then it hit me. Victor knew so much about me when we met. Victor clicked with my father instantly. Victor was always with him. My father arranged this. He had set me up. He had planned this. He found Victor and gave me to him so they could stay together. Please. My father stepped forward, his voice desperate. It was a mistake. A mistake? I whispered, my nails dug into my palms. You made me marry your lover. I turned and ran. I ran while they scrambled to cover themselves. I ran while they called my name, voices shaking. I didn't know how I reached my car. I didn't stop until I reached a hotel, unlocked the door and collapsed onto the floor. My phone was still in my hand, the video still recording. I played it back. I let the horror sink in. I just knew that everything in my life had been a lie. Victor never loved me. My father never wanted the best for me. I was just a piece in their twisted game. Now I had to figure out what to do next. How do I tell my daughter that her father and grandfather were lovers? How do I expose them? And do I even want to? I stared at my phone as their messages flooded in. My father, my husband. Then I turned off my phone and disappeared. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not my mother, not Victor, and not my father. For weeks I stayed in a hotel. Phone switched off, staring at the walls, replaying the scene in my head. My father on his knees, Victor's hands in his hair. I could still hear the sounds. I should have exposed them immediately. I should have screamed, should have torn them apart. But something inside me whispered, wait, make it hot. Make it unforgettable. So I planned. Then one quiet afternoon, I went back home. The moment I stepped through the door, Victor froze. His face went pale. My father, sitting in the living room, stiffened. His eyes darted between Victor and me, filled with unspoken terror. They were expecting something, a confrontation, a breakdown, a war. Instead, I said nothing. My mother rushed toward me. Judith, where have you been? We have been calling and calling. Your daughter has been asking for you. I hugged her. I just needed time, Mommy. She sighed in relief, brushing my hair back like I was still a little girl. You scared us. Please don't do that again. Please. I glanced at my father. I am home now. That was it. Victor flinched. Shifting uncomfortably, my father coughed and looked away. They were waiting for the explosion, waiting for me to ruin them, but I didn't. For the next few weeks, I acted normal. I cooked dinner. I kissed my daughter goodnight. I lay beside Victor in bed while he whispered apologies in the dark. I swear, Judith, I never wanted this. Your father, he tricked me. He took me in when I had nothing, and I felt like I owed him. Please, you have to believe me. I turned to him, brushing a hand over his face. It's okay. Hope you have deleted the video you took, he said in a low voice. Yes, I have. Of course I have, I responded. He exhaled, relieved, pulled me into his arms, thinking I had forgiven him. But every night while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, counting down the days, counting down to my father's birthday. It was a grand event, just like every year. My father loved attention, and this time was no different. Business partners, family friends, politicians, everyone was there. I played the role of daddy's little girl perfectly. I smiled. I toasted to him. I stood beside Victor holding his hand. But when the evening was almost over, I took the microphone. Daddy, I said sweetly, I have a special surprise for you. The crowd cheered. My father beamed suspiciously. "Oh, my dear, what have you done this time? Everyone, please gather in the living room. There is something we all need to see," I said. They followed. My mother sat on the couch, smiling with curiosity. Victor stood stiffly beside my father, his hands clenched. I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The room went silent. And then the video played. My father on his knees, Victor's arms in his hair. The sounds, the same ones that had haunted me for weeks, filled the room. The laughter, the drink, the chatter, all of it stopped. Someone's glass shattered on the floor. My mother screamed. "Nat!" She clutched her chest, eyes wide with disbelief. "What is this?" I turned to look at my father. He wasn't breathing. Victor's hands trembled. His face drained of all color. The guests were in shock. People whispered, stared, backed away. A man covered his wife's eyes. Someone from my father's company recorded the scene on their phone. The damage was done. My father collapsed into a chair, hands gripping his head. Victor tried to step toward me, but I held up a hand. "Don't." His lips parted, but nothing came out. I faced my mother. She was crying, shaking, looking at my father like she no longer recognized him. The room was thick with tension, the video still looping on the massive screen. Gasps and whispers filled the air as all eyes turned to Victor and my father, their faces frozen in horror. I stood tall, my chest rising and falling as I drank in the chaos I had unleashed. My father stumbled back, his face pale, eyes darting around as though searching for an escape. Victor's lips quivered, unable to form words, his hands shaking at his sides. No one could deny the truth now. I turned, ready to walk away, but then I felt it, a gentle hand on my shoulder. I turned to see my mother, her eyes filled with shock, but also something deeper, understanding. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes, but she didn't push me away. Instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. For the first time in years, I felt warmth from the woman who had once seemed so distant. "I am so sorry," my mother whispered, voice trembling. "I had no idea, but I should have seen it." I was so used to standing alone, but I felt myself falter. The anger, the years of resentment, the pain, it all crashed down in a way I didn't expect. Slowly, I let myself lean into my mother's embrace. Around me, the party guests murmured, some awkwardly excusing themselves, others too engrossed in the unfolding drama. My father remained rooted in place, unable to move, unable to stop what had already been set in motion. But at that moment, I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. My mother held me tighter, her voice soft yet firm. "We'll get through this together." Then I picked up my daughter and walked out the door. I changed my number that night. I disappeared. In the days that followed, I heard things. My father lost everything. The scandal destroyed him. His business partners pulled away. His reputation was finished. And my mother, she left him. She packed her bags and moved in with her sister, refusing to see him again. Victor, no one wanted to be associated with him. He tried to reach me through messages, through mutual friends, but I never answered. Everything they built collapsed. And I was free from the lies, free from the manipulation, free from them. Because in the end, silence was my weapon. And when I finally spoke, I made sure it was the last thing they would ever hear.